Firestarter feels like a do-over for Carrie.
We once again have a young girl with psychic powers, though this time she can light fires on top of reading minds and throwing things around. She's a lot younger than Carrie, and she's also in a much more supportive family situation, as her father Andy would clearly do anything for her. Though there is still tragedy in that her mother has been murdered. The people behind it are the shop, also known as the Department of Scientific Intelligence. They gave Charlie's parents an experimental drug that gave them their own powers, and they passed them on to her, making her technically a mutant.
X-Men fan that I am, I don't think it's any surprise that I've always enjoyed this novel. The movie is a pretty accurate adaptation, following the events of the novel in sequence, even down to including the flashbacks in the right place. There are some minor changes here and there, but for the most part the story is the same.
We join Andy and Charlie on the run from the shop, who are trying to capture Charlie and perform experiments to see what exactly she can do. Andy's own mental domination power is helpful in keeping them ahead, but the problem is it's slowly killing him. In the movie, they chose to show whenever Andy was using his power by having him hold his hands up to either side of his head. I suppose they felt like they needed some kind of visual clue, but the fact is that not only does this look ridiculous, but it doesn't make any sense.
If a guy is trying to get you to do something, and you see him putting his hands up and staring at you like this, you gotta be too busy thinking he's a nut to listen to him.
The visual effect for Charlie using her powers isn't much better. The windblown hair is supposed to look dramatic, but it just looks silly instead. What I think baffles me most of all is that this film is full of decent to excellent actors, but most of them give mediocre to bad performances. Drew Barrymore was basically the best you could ask for by child acting standards around this time, but she spends most of the film whining. I think it had to be direction, because she alternates from annoying to really good depending on the scene. The moments with her and Rainbird alone, for instance, are really great. Speaking of Rainbird, he's played by George C. Scott, who, as far as I can tell, doesn't have a drop of Native American blood in his veins. It would seem they decided that giving him a tan and a ponytail was enough to make it work.
He gives a good performance, I just wish they would have cast a true Native American in the role. He's also one of the minor changes in the film. In the book, Rainbird looks into the eyes of his victims because he's trying to see if there's anything on the other side.
But here he says he wants to kill Charlie so he can take her powers with him into the afterlife. It doesn't really make any sense. He's also only blind in one eye rather than having a huge gaping scar and empty socket there, but that's pretty logical for a pre-CGI production. I do think they could have given him some kind of facial scar to make up for it, though.
He looks like less of an outcast without it. They also dropped the idea that Andy's power can sometimes create an echo in the mind of the person he gives suggestions to, making them focus on something in an irrational way.
Cap's fear of finding snakes anywhere is absolutely great in the book, and it's only hinted at here.
Dr. Pinchot's obsession with his garbage disposal is also fantastic, but I'll admit I'm glad they didn't show it in the film. Beyond the weaker performances, the direction and pacing also feel weak.
Events that were much more exciting in the novel, like Charlie accidentally setting the soldiers' shoes on fire, or the capture of Andy and Charlie at Granther's place, just lack any real kind of weight or emotion to them.
The movie feels like it's going through the motions more than anything else. The only moments that pack any real punch are the times that Charlie gets to use her powers.
They clearly put a lot of time and effort into the pyrotechnic effects for the film. The incident at the Manders farm and the moment when Charlie really lets loose on the shop are well done. There's something so cool about seeing those fireballs shoot outward and strike things. I was also glad to see that the horses got to survive this one, whereas King slaughtered them in the book just to add insult to injury.
The movie simplifies the ending, suggesting that the shop was only in that one area and therefore they're gone for good. So there's no need for them to hide Charlie when she returns to the Anders, and they can go directly to the major paper and tell their story.
In the book, she had to sneak off alone and eventually find Rolling Stone to report her story.
I have reservations about recommending this film. It's not awful, but it's not great either. It's mediocre at best. I'd say if you enjoyed the novel, you might want to check it out for curiosity's sake, but otherwise you can just skip it. This is definitely an instance where the book is better.
A mini-series with a teenage Charlie and a miraculously not burned to death Rainbird was made, and Noel's gonna tell us all about that next week.